In an age where the Church faced its deepest crisis, one man stood at the crossroads of history, Bartholomew of Braga, a voice both strong and humble, who would echo through the centuries. But who was this man, and why, in a time of great uncertainty, was his faith so unshakable? To answer that, we must journey back to 16th century Portugal, where Bartholomew, born Bartolomeu dos Martires, began his life in a small village, shaped by the simple but profound piety of his family. As a young boy, he was no stranger to hardship. Surrounded by the tension of an era torn between spiritual decay and the promises of reform, Bartolomew's heart was stirred, not to run from the storm but to face it head-on. And so, at the age of 14, he entered the Dominican order, seeking a life not of comfort, but of sacrifice. What he would find, however, was a vocation far greater than anything he had imagined. From the cloistered halls of study to the public squares of Braga, Bartholomew was not content with mere intellectual pursuit. His was a heart on fire for souls. Elevated to Archbishop of Braga in 1559, he could have easily settled into a life of prestige. But instead, he walked among the people, visiting the sick, comforting the downtrodden, and calling his priests to higher standards. He was a shepherd, first and foremost, but his true test was yet to come. When the Council of Trent called for the greatest reform the Church had seen in centuries, Bartholomew was sent as a representative. Many expected a quiet presence, but what they found was a lion of conviction. He stood before bishops, cardinals, and theologians, speaking truths few dared to utter. He saw that the Church had lost its way, not in its teaching, but in the hearts of those meant to safeguard it. He warned of a clergy more concerned with power than sanctity, and a people who had forgotten the deeper call to holiness. Bartholomew did not come to divide, but to renew, to remind the Church of its ancient mission to save souls. His words were not easy, but they were necessary. With a vision rooted in tradition, Bartholomew became one of the most influential voices at the council, helping to shape the decrees that would renew the Church and its hierarchy. He was a man ahead of his time, fighting not for change's sake, but for a return to what was most sacred. But even as the council's successes were celebrated, Bartholomew returned to Braga a different man, his heart even more devoted to the poor and forgotten. Titles meant nothing to him. His only concern was to serve. In his later years, he withdrew to a small Dominican convent, leaving behind a legacy not of grand reforms, but of deep, personal holiness. It is here that we must pause and ask, what drove Bartholomew? Was it the pursuit of recognition, or the power of influence? No. It was something far deeper. It was his absolute conviction that truth is unchanging. That the Church, despite its human failings, is the guardian of that truth. In Bartholomew's time, many were tempted by new ideas, by promises of an easier faith. But like a rock amid shifting sands, he stood firm, unwavering in his commitment to the eternal teachings of Christ. Bartholomew of Braga's life was a silent testament to the power of tradition. In an age of doubt, he offered certainty. In a time of upheaval, he offered peace. And though centuries have passed, his message remains the same: holiness is not an option, it is a necessity. And the path to it lies not in innovation, but in fidelity to what has always been true. Bartholomew's story is not merely history. It is a challenge to each of us, to stand firm in our own time of crisis, to seek not the easy road, but the road of faithfulness, knowing that in the end, it is truth that prevails.